Because we missed last time, I'm going to repeat some things in the
Yes, sir. Yes,
last
sir.
time. नमस्सर्वेभ्यः IIT मद्रास् संस्थया प्रचाल्यमाने संस्कृतसमितेः आश्रये प्रचाल्यमाने मुद्राराक्षसमधिकृत्य प्रवचनेषु मध्ये पञ्चमाङ्कस्य परामर्शं पुनः कुर्मः। गते प्रवचने कानिचन कष्टानि अनुभूतानि इति कृत्वा पुनः पञ्चमाङ्कस्य विमर्शनं किञ्चित् क्रियते। Last time we had some technical difficulties, and therefore I am going to repeat some of the things that were said in the last talk. The fifth act commences with a conversation between Siddharthaka and Kshapanaka, who is the same as Jiva Siddhi. So in the Praveshaka, that is an interlude between acts. So this is technically considered as a part of the fifth act, but this is only a Praveshaka. The Praveshaka has the job of recounting events that have just transpired or are about to take place. So it gives a link between the events of the previous act and the main act, which is going to start shortly. And in this, we have a conversation between Siddharthaka and Kshapanaka Jiva Siddhi. And Siddharthaka has in his hand a letter prepared by Chanakya. So this letter, as we remember, was given by Chanakya in the first act. And we also know that this letter was got written by Chanakya via Shakatadasa. Shakatadasa, it is in Shakatadasa's handwriting, and the letter was framed by Chanakya. However, the contents of the letter do not reveal who wrote the letter, to whom, etc. And even the content of the letter is ambiguous, and this is very well exploited in this act. Ambiguity is best exploited by, as you can see, as we will have been saying, by politicians, by lawyers, and by astrologers. So ambiguity is put to good use here, and in the letter framed by Chanakya, there is no mention of the author of the letter and the addressee and so on. So we will see what kind of great havoc this letter creates in the present act. So Siddharthaka is all praise for Chanakya Niti Lata, the creeper in the form of Chanakya Niti, which is regularly watered by the Buddhi Jala, so the waters in the form of his intellect, and Desha Kala Kalashehi, so the Desha and the Kala, the time and the place, or the veritable pots, water pots with which the Buddhi Jala is poured. Now, this is to say that the howsoever intelligent a person be, what is important is that the matter that is presented should be at the right time and the right place. So anything going amiss here in questions of time and place can misfire and let many secrets out and ultimately go to sabotage the entire plan. On the other hand, Chanakya is extremely careful. His mind is the most alert mind. So Chanakya himself treasures his intellect, and as he had told towards the end of the first act, so let whoever goes away, leaves and goes away from me, go, but let not my intellect desert me. So Buddhistu ma gan mama. So such is the plan of Chanakya. In fact, all the people who have been described in the first act as deserting Chanakya, all of them did so in fact, did enact that act. So only according to the plan of Chanakya. And it is only because Chanakya does not intend to let the royal secrets be out for those who do not deserve it. So whoever is not ever the receptacle to the secrets, so will not be made that known. And that is why one of his students comes and tells him that so and so has deserted you, so and so has run away, so and so has left the kingdom, and so on. Chanakya is unfazed by these things, and he only says, let whoever wants to desert me, but let let not my intellect ever forsake me. And in this act and in the coming act also, we can see the extraordinary intelligence and brilliance of Chanakya. And there is not a character in the play who is not admiring of Chanakya's brilliance. But all that brilliance would be useless if things are done out of place and out of time. So Siddharthaka says that Chanakya Niti Lata, that creeper in the form of the quality of Chanakya, will show at the right time its fruit in the form of the accomplishment of the task. And the task that is achieved is not something small. So it is Gurukam Karyaphalam. It is something extraordinarily great. So that is achieved by this wisdom of Chanakya. Yeah. So he is in praise of Chanakya's Niti, and he has come with two things in his hand, namely the casket of ornaments, so the ones which are given by Rakshasa in Act 2, and he also has a letter that is prepared by Chanakya, and both of them have the seal of Rakshasa. And while he is moving about, he spots Kshapanaka, who has just come there, and he inquires with him that he is out on a journey, and therefore whether the stars are fine for his journey. And the Kshapanaka mocks at him, as it were, and says, Mundita mundo nakshatrani prichasi. So after having gotten his head shaved, a fellow is asking whether the stars were fine for that act. So Ayush Karma is an act, so which is a very important one, and for which the proper Desha, Kala, etc. have to be taken into account. And if one does not follow that scheme, so it is going to lead to a sort of a demerit. And therefore, these acts must be done at the right time. And therefore, Kshapanaka says, you have already set out on a journey, and you are asking whether it is fine to leave now. And then he says, well, I have to now go to, he is pretending to go to Kusumapura. Actually, he had no particular task. So to go immediately to Kusumapura. So, but he wants certain things to be got known by Malayaketu and others who will all be profoundly confused by what he does. So that confusion is, creation of that confusion is what is most important here. And Chanakya knows its importance. So create confusion in the enemy camp. That's the scheme of Chanakya. And this confusion and delusion is so powerful that it creates diffidence in the mind of some of the leading persons in the enemy camp. And even more than that, it creates distrust. So each with the other. So this is what is achieved by Chanakya. We will see how Malaketu, who had trusted Rakshasa much, so and Rakshasa was very vital to the success of Malaketu's march against Chandragupta and Chanakya. Now Malaketu comes to suspect the very fidelity and integrity of Rakshasa. So we will see how he calls him Anarya, Rakshasa, Kritagna, and so on. And um, even the five leading kings who were allies of Malaketu, um, seeds of the suspicion against those five kings are sown in the mind of um, Malaketu, and ultimately they all get killed by Malaketu. So towards the end of the act, we realize that Malaketu orders the killing of these, and in fact, he disbands Rakshasa himself. Rakshasa was to be the brain behind the success of Malaketu, and if he is himself dismissed, so then what is there left for Malaketu? And in the beginning of the next act, we get to know how Malaketu is so very easily captured, because something like 8 key people occupying important positions in the camp of Malaketu, they are all Chanakya's persons, and therefore capturing Malaketu is accomplished without any difficulty at all. So Chanakya's idea was to defeat Malaketu, and it is not merely winning, it is winning over Rakshasa to his own side, to the side of Chandragupta, and this must be achieved with the least of bloodshed, and therefore he proceeds to act in this manner. So now Chavanaka says that things are not easy in the camp of Malaketu Kataka, and earlier people could easily go to Kusumapura and could come back from Kusumapura easily, but nowadays a passport is very much required, and therefore without a passport it is impossible to go. And Siddharthaka thinks that I am someone who is close to Amatya Rakshasa, and then Chapanaka says you may be close to any Rakshasa or even a Pishacha. So, but without the passport, without the royal seal, you just cannot think of crossing over to the other side, and therefore you will be blocked here. So then the two depart, and you can see that Kshapanaka is already oozing contempt for Rakshasa. So we see how Siddharthaka very seriously lets down Rakshasa, and ultimately this leads to Malaiketu himself strongly suspecting the integrity of Rakshasa and his loyalty towards this side. And Malaiketu is made to feel ultimately that Rakshasa's loyalty is primarily towards Chandragupta, and the act of the dismissal of Chanakya by Chandragupta was directed towards this end, or is something that has highly pleasing to Rakshasa. So that is the idea that he has. Now enter Bhagurayana, and he says the Niti of Chanakya is quite like fate, which is just inscrutable. So at some point it is visible, and suddenly it totally disappears. Suddenly it makes its appearance in a full-fledged manner, and at times it looks so lean and thin that it is almost dying out. And then sometimes the seed sown itself is not to be seen, and therefore we think that everything is now gone, waste, and in no moment we see it accomplishing its fruit in full. And therefore it is quite like the play of fate. So one can only say it's just wondrous. Aho chitrakara niyatiriva niyatir naya vidaha. So, and then Bhagurana has set his camp there, and he has told his servant to bring whoever wants the mudra to come to him. And then there comes Bhagurana, and Malaiketu is also there. So Malaiketu is in his camp, which is so close to Bhagurana's, and Malaiketu has a sort of a suspecting attitude, and therefore wants to spy on what Bhagurana does and says also. And therefore he wants to be seated at a sort of an earshot from where Bhagurana is sitting. And however, even Malaiketu's mind is full of question marks, and he does not know whether he is going to, Rakshasa is going to be loyal to Maurya, or will he be faithful to himself, and so on. Therefore, Ityarudha Kulala Chakramiva me Chetaschiram Brahmeti, and therefore my mind is so full of confusion. And then it is reported that there is somebody who is in need of the passport, and now the fellow is ushered in, and here comes the Kshapanaka Jivasiddhi, and Bhagurana immediately recognizes him as the friend of Rakshasa. Rakshasasya mitram Jivasiddhi. Now, it is this recognition that so and so is this person. So is what is going to create a good deal of problem here. And he asks him whether he is going out to serve some purpose of Rakshasa. And Kshapanaka says, closing his ears, Shantam Papam, he will be averted. I would like to go to a place where even the name of either the Rakshasa or a Pishacha will never be heard. So, as I said earlier, the contempt for Rakshasa is becoming very, very manifest. And then Bhagurana says, you seem to be very angry with Rakshasa. In what way has he offended? And Kshapanaka says, no, Rakshasa has not done any offense. It is as though I have offended myself. So Bhagurana's curiosity is even more roused, and therefore he says, I would like to know what is the matter. And then Malaiketu, who is overhearing, he says, Aham Vishrotum Ichhami. I too would like to know what's happening, because whatever pertains to Rakshasa is something very important to Malaiketu. And already Bhagurana had sown seeds of suspicion in the mind of Malaiketu regarding Rakshasa. In the last act itself, we have seen that. And therefore, Malaiketu is eager to know what's happening with Rakshasa and so on, because if this person who is a good friend of Rakshasa is now seen suddenly cursing him, as it were, then there must be something that's going on which is unpalatable and undesirable. And Kshapanaka only whets the curiosity of Malaiketu and Bhagurana. Malaiketu is hearing unseen, as it were, and then Kimanena Ashrotavyena Shrutena. So, what is the point in listening to this which should not be heard? Bhagurana says, okay, Kshapanaka, if this is a secret, okay, keep it with you. And Kshapanaka says, this is not a secret, but this is something which is very horrifying and painful. And Bhagurana says, howsoever it be, if it can be told, do so. And then Kshapanaka now, in a blunt manner, refuses to tell. And Bhagurana now is anyhow a man in control, and he has to issue a passport. And this Kshapanaka is in need of a passport, and therefore he says, I won't give you a passport. And then now Kshapanaka has no other go, as it were, to reveal. Now, as we are saying that it is only to increase the curiosity of Bhagurayana and Malaiketu that Kshapanaka is uttering these words. Had Kshapanaka merely come and reported whatever he finally reveals, then things would have been so easily taken, or the importance of that would not have been realized, and so on. Therefore, you must hide something to make people curious about it, and therefore he's behaving like this. And he now says, Kshapanaka says that he has no other go than to tell him what has happened. And he says that I was staying in Pataliputra and got close to Rakshasa. So which means that he knows Rakshasa from quite early on. And he says that in that context, Rakshasa made use of this Vishakanya and got killed Parvateshwara. Parvateshwara is the father of Malaiketu. And now, when something is overheard, people tend to believe something rather than when it is plainly told them. So, if Kshapanaka had gone and told Malaiketu that his father was got killed by Rakshasa, probably that wouldn't have had the desired effect. So, namely, revealing things only upon the compulsion of Bhagurayana, and even there appearing to be withholding information, and only upon pressure revealing in steps and so on. So Malaiketu is now completely taken by surprise and taken aback. So Katham Rakshasena Ghatitas Tato Chanakyena. All the while, Malaiketu had believed that it was Chanakya who had got his father killed, and now it happens that it is Rakshasa who has done it. And therefore, he says, on grounds that I am a good friend of Rakshasa, Chanakya expelled me. So as I was banished from there, I had to come over to this side. But then this Rakshasa is Aneka Akarya Kushala. So he is capable of doing many mischievous things and ignoble things. So Akarya is the work of Anarya, as it were, and therefore it is on account of that I am deserting him and going away. And Bhagurayana wants to make it known to Malaiketu some more details regarding this, and he says he expresses the very question that is in the mind of Malaiketu, namely that it was Chanakya who had got Parvataka killed through Vishakanya Prayoga, and is it by Rakshasa at all? So Bhagurayana says, this is what I have heard. And then Kshapanaka says, oh, Chanakya has not even heard the name of Vishakanya, and it is surely Rakshasa who has done. And Malaiketu is now very clear that this is done by Rakshasa himself. And therefore, you find that there is a great disruption between Malaiketu and Rakshasa. The persons who had to act in unison, so there is a great division that has been created between the two, and therefore Malaiketu thinks that his sorrow is now doubled. So Malaiketu himself comes there when Bhagurayana asks Kshapanaka to go and report the matter to Malaiketu. Malaiketu himself was just standing by the side, just behind, so he is able to know everything firsthand. So it is not upon the recommendation of Bhagurayana that he has to tell, and Malaiketu has heard all these with his own ears, and therefore his conviction has become very strong that it is Chanakya that it is Rakshasa who is behind the mischief of getting his father killed, and therefore he is supremely angry and his sorrow has increased manifold. And Kshapanaka to himself says, well, Ayeshutam Malayaketu Hatakena Hantakritarthasmi. Now Malayaketu has heard this and my task is done and exit now. Now that he has collected the passport, so as soon as he revealed the vital information, he was issued the passport and now exit Kshapanaka. So this portion of the fifth act has strongly created suspicion in the mind of Malayaketu about the integrity of Rakshasa. And Rakshasa was all the while behaving that he was a dear friend of Malayaketu and that he was deeply aggrieved on account of the death of Parvataka. But as revealed by Kshapanaka, he was himself responsible for the death of Parvataka. So Malayaketu is now so full of sorrow and he says, Rakshasa, Rakshasa, Yuktam, Yuktam. So, oh Rakshasa, you have done such a proper deed, such a noble deed. So, ironically, he is admiring Rakshasa and he says, my father had placed utmost trust in you, saying that you are his dear friend. Mitram mama ayam iti nirvrita chitta vritim. So he had reposed all his confidence upon you, and all key tasks of Parvataka were delegated to Rakshasa himself, and then you have felled him in this ignoble way, felling alongside the tears of all the kith and kin. And he says, Anvarthatopi, nanu Rakshasa Rakshasosi. And O Rakshasa, you are not merely Rakshasa by name, but even by character and conduct, you are a Rakshasa. So you are a veritable demon. And then Bhagurayana at this point remembers the caution given by Chanakya, namely that at all costs, the life of Amatya has to be secured. So it has to be very, very safe. So it should not be the case that in his moment of fit of anger, Malayaketu goes and kills Rakshasa or gets him killed or whatever. And therefore, he wants to tone down the intensity and anger of Malayaketu towards Rakshasa and therefore speaks in a very intelligent manner, thus lessening his the fury of Malayaketu. And he says, Rakshaniyaha Rakshasasya Pranaha Ityarya. So Arya's Adesha, that is Chanakya's command, is that the life of Rakshasa has to be saved. And therefore, I'll speak like this. So he frames the idea in a particular manner and he says, please sit down, sir, I'll explain to you certain things. So, and Malayaketu, who is so full of grief and anger and confusion, the consequent confusion, so sits down and listens to Bhagurayana, and Bhagurayana's words seem very desirable. And Bhagurayana says, one thing that you must note is that what Rakshasa has done is not as per what the Loka Vyavahara has. This is Arthashastra Vyavahara. So in the case of Arthashastra Vyavahara, Arthavashat Arimitra Udasina Vyavastha. So the labeling of a person or viewing a person as an Ari or Mitra or Udasina, as an enemy, as a friend or ally, and as a neutral person. So is all in terms of the final interests that have to be accomplished and not as in the case of the transactions of the ordinary people where they look into their immediate needs and decide their policy on that account. And therefore, was perceived as more powerful than Chandragupta, and he himself was perceived as a person who was to be considered as an enemy. So, Parvateshwara eva artha paripanthi mahan aratihi asit. So, therefore, what Rakshasa has done towards Parvataka is only proper. So, anybody else in this place would have done the same thing, and therefore, we do not see, we cannot fault Rakshasa to a very large extent. And he says that Rajaniti is something that imparts a new birth, as it were, to the person, and therefore don't blame Rakshasa too very much. And especially till we acquire the Nanda kingdom, we must ensure that Rakshasa is there on our side. And then beyond that, after our goal is accomplished, it is up to you to decide whether we should have Rakshasa with us or not. And Malaiketu comes to appreciate what Bhagavatarayana suggests, and he also adds his own reasons. He says, if the minister is killed, amatya vadhe prakritik shobhaha syat, the people will be agitated. So the news will spread soon far and wide, and the citizens will certainly get highly agitated that an important person like Rakshasa has been killed by the very king, so to whom he was to advise, and so on. And secondly, in a crucial moment of warfare that is about to happen now, so the success in the battle becomes highly doubtful if a very important person is let down like this, or dismissed, or gotten killed, and so on. So by the time they discuss like this, Bhagavatarayana is informed by a servant that there is one more person who is waiting for the passport, and it is Siddharthaka who comes there. And Siddharthaka says that Swami Bhakti, or loyalty to the master or to the nation, is his own mother, as it were. Asmadrishe jananyai pranamamaha Swami Bhaktiyai. So it is this which imparts merits, and it is this that does away with the demerits. So Bhagavatarayana asks him, Priyam kimayam agantukaha ahosi yaiva kasidit parigraha. So is this person someone with connections, or he is just a stray person? And Siddhartha introduces himself saying, sir, I am servant of Arya, Amatya Rakshasa. So, and then Bhagavatarayana asks, if you are a servant of Amatya Rakshasa, how come you are trying to cross this point without a proper passport? Siddhartha says, sir, I have some important task, and therefore I am in a hurry. Karya Gauravena Tvarayitosmi. And Bhagavatarayana asks, what is the importance of the task? And Malaiketu notices the letter in his hand, so in the hand of Siddharthaka, and asks Bhagavatarayana to collect that letter. So, and then he collects that letter and hands over. And then the first thing that is noticed by Bhagavatarayana is that the letter has the seal of Rakshasa there. And Malaiketu says, ensuring that the seal is not disrupted. See, seal typically made of a mark on the wax. This one, so it has to be carefully. The letter has to be carefully opened so that it doesn't break, and therefore ensure. In fact, later also, even the ornaments that this person Siddharthaka has, so even that bag has a royal seal, that is this Rakshasa seal. And even there, Malaiketu instructs that the bag must be opened so that the seal is not broken. So he knows the importance of the seal, and especially when it is Rakshsa's seal, and something is happening without his knowledge. So that seal becomes very important. And therefore, Bhagavana has told, Rakshasa Nama Ankita Yam Mudra. So there could be many seals of many persons, but here is the seal of Rakshasa. And therefore, this assumes very high importance because Malaiketu has reposed all his trust upon Rakshasa, and therefore, something has a royal seal, then it must be terribly important. And the letter is now opened carefully, and Malaiketu reads the letter. And the letter, so as we described earlier, there is no indication of where from the letter is and to whom it is addressed. And so by whom is it written? So all these things are missing. As we know from the first act, this letter was got written with Shakatadasa. So the beautiful handwriting of Shakatadasa. So this is also to create a good amount of confusion in the mind of Malaiketu. Had Chanakya himself written the letter, Chanakya only drafted the letter and got it written in the beautiful handwriting of Shakatadasa. And as Shakatadasa is very known to be a trusted friend of Rakshasa, anything written by Shakatadasa is almost equivalent to something written by Rakshasa himself. In fact, Rakshasa himself makes a statement to that effect, saying that if it is written by Shakatadasa, it is as well as being written by me. And therefore, that letter is read out. And then the letter says that, well, sir, you have shown how truthful you are by removing our rival. Obviously, it is as though it is a letter written by Rakshasa, and Chandragupta has dismissed Chanakya. We have seen that act in the third act, the Kapata Kalaha between Rakshasa and between Chandragupta and Chanakya, where Chandragupta dismisses Chanakya and Tasmat Pratipaksha Nirakritya. So you have shown your truthfulness. It is as though there is a pact between Rakshasa and Chandragupta, and Rakshasa wants to become the minister of Chandragupta. And for the sake of this, first thing that is required is the dismissal of Chanakya. And thank you, sir, for being truthful in acting out according to our plan and dismissing our rival. So there is no mention of any proper name here. So only pronouns are used, and therefore it is up to the interpreter to interpret. And it has also been mentioned in the very letter that Siddharthaka can interpret the letter and he has some more message to add. And therefore, Siddharthaka's message becomes very important. And his interpretation is also going to count very naturally. And therefore, the letter further says that, well, there is a reference to 5 kings. So it is as it were a pact that those 5 kings are now allies of Rakshasa, and they have these ultimate goals. Namely, after the success of the war with Chandragupta and Chanakya, waged by Malaiketu against Chandragupta and Chanakya, these 5 kings want these things. So it is a sort of a barter. So they are like veritable mercenaries who fight for certain personal gains. And what things ought to be gained has been also spelled out. And the earlier gift of the ornaments, so that is also directly indicated here. And then some of the kings want some portion of the territory, and someone has an eye on the treasury, and someone wants horses, etc., the elephants, etc. So all these things are indicated, and there is a reference also to the 3 ornaments and so on, and much more than what is contained in the letter will be explained by Siddharthaka, the person who bears this letter. So it's not as though that somebody's letter has somehow been gotten hold of by Siddharthaka. Siddharthaka's name is also mentioned there. And therefore, it is very obvious that this seems to be a very authentic letter in the hand of Siddharthaka. And therefore, it's not somebody else's letter to somebody that is being made use of here and misused and misinterpreted and so on. And that Siddharthaka can explain the contents of the letter and the additional message. So is also very evident from the letter itself. And then Malaiketu himself has read this letter and then asks Bhagurana what kind of a letter is this. And Bhagurana asks Siddharthaka, so whose letter is this? Siddhartha says, well, I do not know. Bhagurana becomes angry and what is the Vachika? So to whom was the Vachika message to be told? So, and Siddhartha says, well, to yourself, sir. So he's pretending that he is damn afraid. And it's all very confusing and it's not making sense. And Siddhartha says, well, you have captured me and I do not know what I should tell. And Bhagurana says, it is very easy to make such people who speak in multiple voices or confusing voices. So they must be nicely beaten and then they will reveal the truth. And therefore he asks his assistant Bhasuraka, take him out and give him a nice beating. And so his assistant takes him out and gives him a nice beating, and then they come back. And then the servant also says, in addition, sir, we spotted one more thing, that in his armpit was this bag, so which also has the seal of Rakshasa. So there is a seal on that bag, and that bag fell from the armpit of this fellow. So I want to bring this to your attention. And Bhagurana says, well, even this has Rakshasa's mudra, Rakshasa's seal. And Malaiketu says, open this bag once again without affecting the seal. And he's able to immediately recognize that the ornaments therein were the ones that were given by himself, that is by Malaiketu himself, to Rakshasa. So he had sent it to Rakshasa and removing them from his body, from his own person. And now he is able to come to the conclusion on his own that this is a letter addressed to Chandragupta. So Yaktam Chandraguptasya Lekhaka is an letter addressed to Chandragupta. And then Bhagurana says this fellow must be beaten again in order to reveal things in full. And this fellow is taken out and beaten. And he says, I can reveal things only to Kumara himself. And Malaiketu says, yes. And Siddhartha falls to his feet and says, you must first give me Abhaya. So if you assure that I'm not going to be killed or some such thing, so assure me safety, then I can reveal. Malaiketu says, Abhayameva parvato janasya, Abhaya, security fully granted. Now tell me the full truth. So Niveditam yathavasthitam. And then Siddhartha says, this is a letter written by Amati Rakshasa addressed to Chandragupta. And now things are getting clearer and clearer, and the confusion in the mind of Malaiketu is getting stronger and stronger. So, just a minute. Okay. And then he says, I want to now know the Vachika. Vachika idanim shotam ichchami. He says, there are these 5 kings who have developed friendship with me. They are, one is Chitravarma, the king of Kuluta, and then there is Simhanada of Malaya, and Pushkaraksha of Kashmira, Sindhusena, who is the king of the Sindhu kingdom, and Meghanada, a Parasika king. And of these, the first three kings want the domain of the kingdom. So they are after the domain. And then the other two want the Hastibala, the group of elephants that he has, the entire unit of the elephants, and also the treasury. And now that Chanakya has been dismissed, so you must keep to your promise and so on. And Malaiketu is now in a state of utter confusion that is Kauru, Chitravarma, and others. So they are also sabotaging his plan and are actually plotting against Malaiketu himself. Chitravarmadiyah api mam abhiduhyanti. And that is why Athava Ateva Rakshase Nirdishya Priti. And that's why they are showing a great deal of love and admiration and loyalty to Rakshasa. And now Ketu says that he wants to see Rakshasa. And then we now move on to the next scene in this act where Rakshasa is seen, and Rakshasa is a bit worried that there are many people in our army, so with people who belong to Chandragupta. So that is to say, their loyalty is not very much to be trusted. Name manasah parishuddhirasti, and therefore my mind is not placid or cool on account of that. So I have no mental tranquility on account of this. And in this case, the enemy has to be handled very carefully. And he sends the information through Priyamvadaka that the day of the attack on the enemy, the attack on Kusumapura, is fast approaching, and therefore you must all get ready. And he also indicates that the strategy, namely kings like Khasa and Magadha have to lead in front, and Gandharas, they have to be in the middle, and then the Yavana kings also have to be there, and then Shaka and China and Huna, so they must be behind, and even Kauluta and others. So they must all surround the prince Malayaketu. So this is the scheme. So the positions of the various kings in the army, so these have all been indicated. So Rakshasa has planned a great deal for the success of the this battle, and therefore he has even decided the positions. So who has to be where, in which part of the army, and has to fight. So all important kings who can be trusted the most have to be near Malayaketu. So because his safety is most important. So these are all the ideas in the mind of Rakshasa. And he sends this message accordingly. So the servant Priyamvadaka is to go and inform these details. And then by then Pratihari enters, and she says that Malayaketu wants to see Rakshasa, and Rakshasa would not like to go and see Malayaketu. So without this, without the ornaments that Malayaketu had himself presented to him, and therefore I must put on those ornaments, he says, and among the three ornaments that are also bought by Rakshasa, so these were sent by Chanakya. So one among them is taken, and Rakshasa puts them on, and then he approaches Malaiketu, and even on his way, there are some general apprehensions in his mind, so which he expresses. Adhikarapadam nama nirdoshasyapi purushasya mahadashankasthanam. And someone occupies some position of authority, it becomes a matter of suspicion for many, because the fellow may misuse that adhikara, and therefore gatisyochrayanam padanamanukulam kalait. So people who are in a high position, so will always have to be afraid that they may sometime lose that. So, and then he comes and sees Malaiketu. So he sees Malaiketu has a shunya drishti, so seeing nothing, a blank vision, and he's almost crestfallen, looking at his own feet and his face resting on his hands and so on. Then Malaiketu says, Arya, Abhivadaye, idam asanam asitam. He shows respect to Rakshasa, because before conducting a proper inquiry, the verdict should be passed, and he should not act in any dastardly manner. And therefore, he asks why Rakshasa has been rather late in arriving. And then Rakshasa says, Prayane pratividhanam anutishthata maya kumarat ayam upalambhaha adhigataha. So I was adopting the precautionary measures. So he was explaining to Priyamadaka as to which king should be in which spot and so on. So for those reasons, there was some delay. And then what arrangements have been made regarding our march against the foe? And Rakshasa spells out the details exactly as he had spelled it out to Priyamadaka. And then Malaiketu is a bit taken by surprise, because the self-same kings who were listed in the letter, who were indicated in the letter, so they are the very ones who have been asked to surround Malaiketu in the march of the army against Chandragupta. So, eva madvinashena Chandragupta maradhaitum udyataha ta eva mam parivrinanti. So, are these very people to surround me in our march against Chandragupta, whereas those very kings who are to surround me are the ones who want to please Chandragupta and ultimately get their share of the kingdom, the elephant force, and so on. So now Rakshasa says, now no question, and Malaiketu asks him one important question. Arya, asti kashchit yah Kusumapuram pratigachati. Is there somebody going to Kusumapura, or is there anyone coming from Kusumapura? So we know with what intention Malaiketu is asking those questions. He doesn't give any clue as to why he is asking those things. And Rakshasa says, no more, sir. There is no point in sending anybody now or somebody coming from there, etc. So avasitam idanim gata gata prayojanam. There is no question of gata and agata, somebody going, somebody coming, and so on. So in a matter of just a few days, we are ourselves marching against Kusumapura. So vayameva tatra gantaraham. And then Malaiketu says, but why is it that this person was being sent with this letter? So kim aryena ayam salekha purushaha preshitaha. And he is pointing to Siddharthaka, who is there, and Rakshasa now notices Siddharthaka, and he is taken by surprise and asks Siddharthaka, "Yes, Siddharthaka, Bhadra kimidam? What's all this?" And Siddharthaka now sheds tears. So they are all good at play and so enacting things, and therefore shedding tears and showing his bashfulness. So, or rather a sense of shame, and says, sir, I was beaten and therefore I had to let all the secrets out. So Tadyamanena maya naparitam rahasyam dharayitam. The Rakshasa is not able to figure out what secret. Kidrisham rahasyam iti nakhalu avagacham. I am not able to understand what is the secret that you are referring to. So Rakshasa is just puzzled. So, and Siddhartha says, Sir, I told you just now that I was being beaten. And Malaiketu says, well, in front of his master, this fellow, either on account of fear, on account of shame, so he does not speak out. And therefore, Bhagurayana, speak out now what's happening. And then Bhagurayana says, well, Rakshasa, well, Amatya, this person is carrying this letter, so which has been sent by you to Chandragupta. And then the Rakshasa asks him, Siddhartha, is this true? And Siddhartha says, well, sir, that's what I told when I was severely beaten. And Rakshasa is still not able to get to know anything. And he says, well, this is all false. So he just denies that and says, if a person is beaten severely, he may confess to anything. Tadimana Purushaha Kimiva Nabruyat. And Malaiketu says, Bhagurayana, show the letter. Now, step by step, they are revealing to Rakshasa what they are investigating. And the Vachika, the oral message that is passed on, so will be told by this person. So, and then Malaiketu says, show this letter. And Bhagurayana presents the letter to Rakshasa, and Rakshasa reads the letter and says, Kumara Shatroh Prayogaha Esha. This is something that is mischief that is done by the enemy. And Malaiketu says, then how about this ornament? So, Lekhasya Ashunyartham Aryena Idamapi Abharanam Anuprishtam. So, you have sent this ornament also. So, Tat Katham Shatro Prayogaha Esha. If this has the ornaments in your possession, how would you construe this to be an act of the enemy? And Rakshasa recognizes those ornaments, and then he says, well, these are the ornaments that the prince had sent me. And I had given these ornaments to Siddhartha when he had accomplished some good task, and I gave him as a gift. And Bhagurayana asks, so whether such a person is worthy of such gifts as to present ornaments present on his own person. Atma Gatrad Avatarya Prasadi Kritasya Ayam Parityagabhumi. Is he the right patra? Is he the right recipient? And it also says, the letter also says Malaiketu, that there is this Vachika, oral message. So, Aptatama Dasmachrotavyam iti, that it has to be heard by through this person who is the most trusted one, Aptatama. And the Rakshasa is still puzzled and says, Kuto Vachikam, Kasya Vachikam, Lekhai Vasmadi Yona Bhavati. So, what is the oral message and whose message is it? And even the letter itself does not belong to us. Then Malaiketu asks, whose seal is this? And then Rakshasa says, well, there are people capable of designing Kapata Mudra. So counterfeit seals can always be generated. And Bhagurayana says, well, what the minister is saying is quite true. You can see that Bhagurayana is playing a very neat role, apparently defending Rakshasa every now and then, but also not, not concealing the secret. So, Bhadra Siddharthaka Kenayam Likito Leka. He puts the question straight to Siddharthaka as to by whom the letter was written. So, we shall stop here and then continue the next act in the next session. Namaste.
Namaste, sir. Thank you very much.